Welcome to the 2018 AWS Public Sector Summit Canberra. Please help me welcome to the stage Brad Coughlin, Country Manager, ANZ, Worldwide Public Sector, Amazon Web Services.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to Alexa for our introduction. For those of you who aren't familiar with Alexa, she's our AI-driven voice of many of our Echo devices, and she'll be welcoming all the presenters throughout the sessions this afternoon. Welcome to our AWS Public Sector Summit. Amazon Web Services would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal peoples, the traditional owners of the land upon which we hold this event, and we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Wow. Can you believe the size of the audience? Our theme throughout the rest of today is all about building on AWS and going and building. It's all about providing you with a day-long opportunity for you to learn, for you to educate yourselves and build your knowledge of what AWS could do in your organizations. It's about how you can build with our partners. It's about showcasing some of our customers who are building amazing solutions on AWS. And if you're not already part of the AWS family, it's about building your confidence so that you can go back to your organizations and you can build something amazing of your own on AWS. An event like this doesn't come together without the support of our many sponsors. I'd like to thank our platinum sponsors, Intel, and Ian Rouse and the team at Technology One. I'd like to thank our gold sponsors, Palo Alto, Veritas, VM, Instructure. Our silver sponsors, Object Consulting, Elastic, Equinix, Trend Micro, Splunk, and Dynatrace. For our networking session at 5 o'clock this afternoon, I'd like to thank DXC Technology. And to the exhibitors in our trade show, Bespoke Training Service, Cloud 10, Pluralsight, Udrew, Genvis, and Doug and the team at Red Bear IT. What an amazing turnout. We had another 100 registrations come in over the last 24 hours. More than 1,500 registrations, and the dropout rates this year have been incredibly low. We spent most of yesterday's pre-day bringing more chairs and more tables into our sessions. And if the number of people who came through the door this morning is any indication, we are up something like 50% year on year on the attendance that we had at this same Canberra Summit only 12 months ago. We have 15 sponsors. You'll be able to participate in 40 or more sessions to increase your education and your knowledge of AWS. That'll be running across 7 different theatres. So I encourage you to join the conversation using @AWS_gov or @AWS_edu, and make sure you use the hashtag AWS Summit. So let's take a quick look at how we built our global business over the last year or so. We have millions of active customers in more than 190 different countries around the world. Our most recent Q2 results, we delivered more than $6 billion worth of revenue that puts us on a run rate to be a $24 billion run rate business, or some 49% year-on-year growth. We have tens of thousands of government agencies, educational institutions and not-profits who now use AWS. They range from the largest federal government departments and agencies to the smallest and scrappiest not-for-profits and research teams. We also have a fast-growing community of premier consulting partners who are increasingly helping customers just like you to build on AWS. And in last year alone, we added more than 10,000 new partners to our Amazon partner network. And the stat that I took away from that is more than 6,000 of those partners are outside of the US. We also have thousands of ISVs and software as a service providers who are building customer-focused solutions that run on the AWS platform. But let's bring this a little closer to home. We've seen some amazing customer and partner builders in Australia and New Zealand as well. And you'll hear shortly from a couple of those local customers, like the CSIRO, like IP Australia, and RMIT Online, and hearing firsthand what they have been building on AWS. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Martin Bean, who's the Vice-Chancellor of RMIT University, for joining us today and for supporting our Canberra Summit. Thank you, Martin. But there are many more public sector customers who continue to build on AWS. I can't talk about all of the logos here, this is just a sample, but I'll pick out a couple. GovCMS. We're thrilled that the Department of Finance has expanded its use of the AWS platform and has engaged Salsa Digital and Amazy.io to manage the website hosting service that they built on Drupal for another 3 years. I love the ABS story. I love the quote that came out in the IT news about 4 or 5 weeks ago that said, if you want to run 400 concurrent censuses all at once, AWS is the type of infrastructure that you run it on. And it was a reference to the same-sex marriage survey program in September through November of last year. And I love what we're doing with Landgate and their land registry as a service project. There was a quote recently from Jody Kant, who was their CEO at our Perth Initiate event, who said, by harmonising people, process and technology through their cloud-first adoption program, in the 2016-2017 financial year, Landgate delivered a $26 million profit. But she then went on to say, without the reform that was driven by the AWS cloud and the alignment across those different areas of their business, they would have been staring down the barrel of a deficit. We're also building up our local public sector partner community, with more and more local partners lining up to be accredited under those government and not-for-profit competencies so that they can help you in your specific domain areas to build on AWS. But let's take a quick look at the pioneering journey that we've been on as we built our public sector business here in Australia and New Zealand. As many of you may know, Amazon Web Services was formed in 2006. If we fast forward to November of 2012, we launched our Sydney region, so public sector customers could finally start to design, build and run workloads that they knew would be hosted on Australian soil. 2013, we spent a lot of time working with customers just like you on your cloud policies. 2014 were a lot of conversations around security and compliance. 2015 were conversations with procurement folks or acquisition folks so that we could allow you to scale quickly once AWS took off in your organizations. 2016 were about making sure that people in your organization had the right skills and the right education so that they could take advantage of the benefits of AWS. At our summit last year, we launched our initiative around 24/7 government powered by AWS. And this year, as you'll see throughout the course of the day, it's about building on AWS. We're also committed to building a lot of other things. And top of mind for us is diversity and inclusion. Only last week we sponsored the Women in Tech Australia conference in Sydney. And Miriam McElmore, who's our enterprise strategy lead and the former CIO of Coca-Cola Worldwide, delivered the keynote in front of 800 attendees. And this morning, I'm pleased to announce the Young Women Leaders in Artificial Intelligence program. We're partnering with IntelliHQ and KJR to announce our Young Women Leaders in AI program, an initiative that will take an initial 75 young women leaders who will participate in a year-long training, boot camp, and mentoring program to build more capability in this space. If you're interested in further building your knowledge of what else we're doing in this area, don't forget to join Tricia for lunch at the Inclusive Conversation session straight after this in theatre number 2. We're also working on building our next-gen workforce, and the cornerstone of that is our AWS Educate program. We have 1,500 educational organisations around the world that have now signed up to AWS that provides AWS Educate, that provides credits to both educators and students, curriculum and resources to enable them to weave AWS capabilities across a range of their curricula. There are more than 10,000 educators and students who have signed up, hundreds of thousands of students in more than 200 countries and territories who have enrolled in the program worldwide. Here in Australia and New Zealand, we're also building our local family of AWS Educate customers. Fantastic customers like University of New South Wales, RMIT, Swinburne, University of Queensland, University of Western Australia, Auckland Uni, and of course locally here, the University of Canberra and ANU. As part of building that next-gen workforce, we also hosted a student day yesterday. We had more than 150 kids join us for our student track who were building some amazing solutions on AWS. And there are 2 particular things that I'd like to call out for you. Most recently, there was a Bega Festival of the Cloud competition, which was won by Eden Marine High School for their calf medication management solution, an Alexa-based skill. We also had a separate Alexa Cloud Skill competition organised by Western Sydney University, which was won by Catherine Macaulay Westmead School with their Stress Less skill. And I think we've got some of the teams in the audience. Please put your hands together for the winners of the competition, please. Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Hunter. We're building your skills too, because you and LinkedIn keep telling us that cloud and distributed computing are the most in-demand skills for the 3rd year in a row. So we know that we can't slow down. Gartner estimates that the cloud sector will grow to more than $400 billion by 2020. In response to that challenge, we've already built more than 100 free courses online. We're providing you with free access to Cloud Practitioner Essentials, and we're launching training to help you prepare for your AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exams. If you want to find out more about what's available to you as far as the AWS training and certification goes, please go to aws.training. We've also been playing our part in building a thriving startup community across Australia and New Zealand. From the smallest one-person startups with a great idea, through to global leaders like Atlassian, who started out as a 2-person startup and today are a $20 billion industry powerhouse, employing more than 2,500 people and still running on AWS. We're also helping to build local education startups through our EdStart program, supporting budding entrepreneurs who are building that next generation of online learning, analytics, and campus management solutions on the AWS cloud. The team at AWS have put together a phenomenal program for you. There are a series of breakouts after lunch, afternoon tea, another series of breakout sessions, and then please join us for the networking drinks sponsored by DXC at 5 p.m. this afternoon. We're thrilled to have you here with us. And I'll leave you with one simple question. What will today's Amazon Web Services Public Sector Summit inspire you to go and build on AWS? And while you ponder that question, I'll ask Alexa to help introduce our next keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Can everyone please join me in welcoming Glenn Gore, Lead Solutions Architects, Amazon Web Services, to the stage.
Excellent. Good morning, Canberra. It's great to be here. An excuse to come back home. It's good. It's amazing. Last time I was at the Canberra Public Sector Summit was about 4 years ago. It was in a different venue, a lot smaller, and it's great to see the momentum that's coming. But when you think about what is public sector, it's such a broad range of makeup right here in this audience. Everywhere from government itself, federal and state level, security, education, which I think is just such a wonderful area of innovation right now, where you think about the big changes in skills. I mean, when you look at what's happening at a macro level globally, there is so much change happening across everything. Change of technology, change of social interactions through the use of technology, communications, climate change and how that's changing things such as agriculture, which is a massive area of innovation now, as companies really start thinking about how can we be smarter with our resources, the skills that we're going to need in the future, and the reality that you can't actually teach the current generation skills that they're going to use as a career for the rest of their working life, because those jobs are going to change every 7 to 10 years in a pretty dramatic way. The entire energy sector, as we go towards renewables, this is all change. And it's great to see just how much innovation there is happening within public sector, because sometimes as you move around the world, people kind of feel that actually public sector maybe doesn't innovate as much as other industries do. But I think the reality is actually the opposite. And I'm super excited this morning as part of the keynote to have 3 incredible customers who are going to share their story. They're going to touch about big areas such as health, and how that affects the day-to-day living and health and well-being of what we're doing, and how technology is helping research and improve the quality of life for people, through to how we actually think about protecting the innovation that comes out of Australia, and then what are we doing to help educate the next generation in new and novel ways and use new technologies in world-leading first-case examples of this. I'm really excited to be able to share some of this with you this morning. So if you take a step back for a second and say, well, there's all this innovation happening across different areas. What's cloud's role in this? Why is AWS, why did we invest in this over 12 years ago? And we thought this would be one of the most disruptive plays that would lead the industry. And really it was around, one, there's a better way to do security. And we see this from customers time and time again, that when they move their workloads to AWS, they end up with a better security posture than in on-premise. You're able to deal with securing services at a micro level, component by component. And one of the things that cloud gives you as an artifact is it gives you great transparency and visibility as to how every single one of those individual components is being used, who has access to it, who accessed it, at a really low cost. And you see innovations such as, for example, AWS Guard Duty, which you can wrap around your application stack on AWS at the click of a button. You didn't have to modify anything. You didn't have to change code. You didn't have to install anything. And straight away, you've got industry-leading AI and machine learning giving you real-time updates as to what threats may be existing for your service. Really important if you're running mission-critical workloads on AWS. The second area was agility. We want to be able to be faster at taking our ideas and putting them into practice. And when I think about innovation, there's this great quote from Joy Oito from MIT Media Labs, which is, if you want to increase the pace of innovation, you want to lower the cost of failure. And when people think about the cost of failure, we often think about just the financial cost first and foremost. But actually, I'd argue that the biggest cost is time. You can actually get money, but you can't get time easily. Once you've spent that time, you don't get it back. And if it's going to take you 6 months or 12 months to prove an idea or test a hypothesis, an experiment, that's a long time, versus if you can do it in an afternoon. And I love it when I work with customers, and literally in an afternoon we come up with an idea, we test it, we prototype it, and we're able to see whether there's value in the idea and if it's technically possible or not, and then iterate on it really quickly. So agility is really important. Third is, you want to be able to have scale. What if that idea that you've just been able to test quickly and you've been able to say, look, we can do this cheaply, quickly, what if it actually takes off? What if it does attract millions of users to your platform? You want to have the confidence that you're on a platform that can scale. In AWS, we run some of the largest workloads running out in the industry today across a number of different industry types, and they rely on this scalability, the kind of the automatic way the platform can respond to that, whether it be Netflixes of the world distributing content through to government bodies, to governments that are dealing with natural disaster crises, which are really unpredictable. You don't know when they're going to hit, which makes it really hard to size the capacity for them. Being able to take that guesswork away and allow those emergency agencies, for example, to focus on offering the best care when it's most needed, instead of worrying about do they have enough infrastructure and trying to get it. That changes how they work with citizens. And last but not least is get rid of the cost. One of the biggest changes I've actually seen, which we don't talk a lot about in the industry, is that when you reduce the cost of IT, you actually kill the business case that was required to justify big purchases. And this drives innovation in a big way when you think that you can have an idea and you can jump on AWS, use the console, spin up some resources, often within a free tier, so it doesn't even cost you anything, and test, instead of having to write and go to your CIO and ask for, I need $10,000, $100,000, and they're going to say, well, what's the return on this going to be? That's stifled innovation in a big way, removing these things. So these 4 big aspects, they've been there from day one when we first thought about cloud, and they still exist today. If you look at all the services and announcements we have, they rely on these 4 core pillars. When we talk about scale, though, what about if you want to go global on this? We continue to expand and invest in the services we have around the world. We have 18 regions. Think about a region as a collection of the availability zones. Each of the availability zones, of which there's 55 of them around the world today, is made up of 1 or more physical data centers. And we co-locate these availability zones within a region in what we call an active-active manner. And why do we do that? Because we care that if you're going to be running material workloads on the cloud, active-active is the best way to run that. You don't want to have standby. If something fails in your application stack, or touch wood, even an availability zone goes offline, your users should not notice. And we have customers using this exact architecture every minute of the day. And this is really great as they start looking at agility and doing code deployments. What I love is customers are now taking this to the next degree and actually saying, well, how do I go from multi-availability zone availability to multi-region? How can I have redundancy at a truly global scale? And then last but not least, you have the edge locations, 108 of them around the world, which is content delivery networks and DNS and some ability to upload content really fast through S3 upload service, for example. It's all about how do we get content as close to the edge as we possibly can, closest to the users. Australia is a massive place. Serving all that content just out of Sydney is not a great experience for people depending where they are. It gets bigger as you go around. We haven't solved the speed of light yet. But the real proof point of this is, there's a lot of talk sometimes about innovation and how fast people are. This is the antithesis sometimes of what happens. When IT became more complex, it often slowed us down. As systems got bigger, we put more control around them. What I love is when you get the architecture right and you start embedding things like DevOps and microservices and serverless components, the opposite occurs. You can actually start innovating faster. And these are the real stats of just how many new features and changes have been made to the AWS platform year by year. Last year was over 1,400 of them. Keeping up to date with what's changing is a full-time job. But it's accelerating. This year it will be even higher. And if you look at those numbers, 95% of the changes actually come from you. Every time you use the platform, we're listening. We're getting feedback about, can we tweak this? It would be great if you could solve that. This is what drives the evolution of AWS, is your feedback. So thank you very much. Please keep giving us the feedback. We get a ton of it every time we run a summit. The solution architects are down on the expo floor there. They love hearing your feedback that drives this innovation. And what it results in is the most diverse set of services of any cloud provider in the world. There's over 130 single services in this, ranging from security services to infrastructure, software development, AI and ML, IoT, gaming services, enterprise applications. There will be a quiz at the end if you can remember all of this. But it's absolutely key that not only do you look at the breadth of these services, but the depth within them. You just take EC2, for example, the Elastic Compute Cloud, the ability to run VMs. The choice you have around compute and memory and I/O capabilities is incredible. What about if you want access to the world's fastest GPU technologies to run those machine learning workloads? What about if you want FPGAs, for example, in the FinServ industry? You have that choice within just EC2 alone. So I want to talk about, there's a couple of models we think about when you run on cloud. And for public sector, for those of you in the audience who are thinking, this sounds good, but how do I actually shift my workloads and my kind of technical debt, some of my existing systems to AWS? I like to think about it as these 4 models. The really easy way to do it is just rehost, kind of lift and shift. Just pick it up, move it across, make minimum change. You get some quick wins. Really good if you have to get out of a data center quickly, for example, or you have a capacity constraint and you don't want to invest in more hardware. Second one is, what if I want easy optimizations? Maybe I'll kind of lift and reshape. I might modify it and use some of the services that are available on AWS to make some minor improvements as I go through. I can re-provision, which gives me more benefits as I go through this, but a little bit more work, and I might start looking at how partners can help me move to a managed service in the cloud, for example. Software as a service starts coming at this. And then last but definitely not least is where you re-architect or refactor. This is where, what if I was to go cloud native with my services and use all of the advantages of technology, microservice and serverless, and I get the best bang for buck? What I want you to take from this slide is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Even at a customer-by-customer layer, you may address different application stacks within your own organization in a combination of these 4 models. There is not just a single way that this works. Now, when you look at this, I really get excited when customers re-architect because I love what we can do with microservices and serverless. And our next speaker from CSIRO, I love the combination she's doing with kind of health services and biotech and combining that with cutting-edge technologies and what you can achieve when you mix those two together. So Alexa, let's introduce our next speaker to the stage.
Please welcome to the stage Dr. Dennis Bauer, Team Leader, Transformational Bioinformatics, CSIRO.
I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good.
Well, thank you, Glenn and Alexa, and probably in that order. So I'm here today to tell you a story around how we used AWS infrastructure to build a genomic application that just a couple of years ago would have seemed impossible. But what is actually genomic data, or the genome, and why am I so excited about it? Well, the genome holds the blueprint for every cell in your body. It built it from the single cell to the 100 trillion cell organism that an average human body is built of. So therefore, the genome is the ultimate builder. It affects the way we look, we behave, and the disease risk that we have. So for example, there's something that is called the hitchhiker's thumb, where the last digit bends backwards if you have a couple of changes in your genome. So as you can see, I have a pretty boring thumb. But in the audience, 1 in 3 will have a hitchhiker's thumb. So look around you and see if you can spot some impressive specimens. So with that information encoded in the genome, it's not surprising that more and more the genome is actually used in the healthcare system. So in fact, by 2025, it's estimated that 50% of the world's population will have been sequenced, which means that genomic data will be larger than the traditional big data disciplines, Twitter, YouTube, and astronomy combined. A staggering 20 exabytes of data per year. So I'm really, really excited about that. But with that, of course, come problems, technical problems. One is, and I'm listing three. So one is the large volumes of data that we query is not trivial to actually get hold of. Specifically, when we're talking about 40 gigabytes per genome, per human, per individual, that is not trivial. We also experience burstable workloads where clinicians might access this resource at the same time as 10,000 other clinicians. But the next minute, it might drop to nothing. Therefore, we certainly don't want to pay for this, for a workload that can crunch that much data, and then the next time there's nothing, it's just sitting around idly. And the third problem is consolidating data from silos. So with privacy and regulation, it's unlikely that we're going to consolidate the world's genomic data into one single entity. Therefore, dealing with distributed systems will have to be something we need to get used to. So this really requires a builder's mindset. And luckily, at CSIRO, we're native builders and innovators. So CSIRO is Australia's government research agency, where we're passionate about translating research into products that people can use in their everyday lives. For example, we invented Wi-Fi, which is now used in 5 billion devices worldwide. We also developed the vaccine to the Hendra virus, which is a virus that is 3 times more deadly than Ebola. And on a lighter note, we developed the Total Wellbeing Diet, which is on the bestseller list alongside books like The Da Vinci Code or Harry Potter. So from that perspective, I feel we have a nice mix between products that people need and products that people enjoy. So you might have seen that today CSIRO released its Future of Health report, in which we outline how our vision is for the next 15 years of healthcare in Australia. And one of the biggest messages from this was that we need to stop being reactive, treating illnesses, to being preventative and catching illnesses before they actually become symptomatic. And one of the key themes in there was digital health. So I'm working for the eHealth research program within CSIRO, which is the largest digital health agency in Australia. And here, we want to improve healthcare through using digital technologies and services. Another theme that was in the report was precision medicine. So delivering on this vision, we have developed VariantSpark, which is a machine learning library for genomic data analysis. So here specifically, it's built on the Apache core. And what you can do is you can spin up an Apache Spark cluster using Elastic Kubernetes services to analyze your data directly on AWS. So the other thing that VariantSpark is specifically designed for is to do the analysis on specifically wide data that the genome happens to be with its 3 billion letters, where any one of those letters could cause a disease. And we know this because we're part of the international consortium that looks into the genetic origins of ALS. But bringing the information that we found in the genome into the actual clinical practice and making decisions on it is not trivial. And for that, we developed GenFen Insight, which is a tool that combines medical data with genomic data to improve in real time treatment diagnosis and treatment outcomes or recommendations. So it is specifically designed for scaling to the growing need of genomic data in the future. And bringing genomic data together with the medical data into the healthcare system was demonstrated to reduce cost by 27%, as done by the Melbourne Genomic Health Alliance, which we are part of. So I want to tell you a little bit about the actual pathway to success and come back to the 3 issues that I mentioned earlier. So how did we get around the burstable workload? Well, we used AWS Lambda, which is a serverless function which I think of sort of as free-floating CPUs, where you write your function and don't have to worry about the actual architecture or the infrastructure that executes those functions. It also helps with consolidating silos, because what you can do is you can compute functions in your specific silos, which is called confidential computing. So having a Lambda function execute the analysis in the silos, and then only the summary results are shared across the rest of the infrastructure. So people are much more likely to open up to an analysis like that where they don't have to give out the actual data. And it also helps, of course, with the amount of genomic data that we have. So our genome files are located in a data lake on S3. Now, all of this has not been straightforward. In fact, it has been an iterative process, where we started off with one infrastructure and then tweaked it in order to get a better performance or enable the analysis that we wanted to do. So inspired by that, we wrote a blog post that we pompously called DevOps 2.0, because our vision is that you can do evolution of the architecture in a scientific way. So you can start with a hypothesis, validate that hypothesis, and then tweak it in order to go in circles, which is a much more, in our mind, directed way of evolving architecture quickly. So with this, let me summarize. I strongly believe that once you go serverless, you never go back. The speed of innovation is incredible. You can stand up a minimal viable product in a couple of seconds and with minimal cost. You don't have to think about the actual underlying infrastructure, what kind of EC2 instance you're using, and things like that. And for our use case, it was specifically important that it allows burstable workloads. And I believe that serverless is sort of the driver for the one cloud is better than 1,000 silos, because it allows confidential computing. So with this, we are Australia's innovation catalyst, but you are its influencers, developers, and builders. So together, let's build a healthier Australia. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Dennis. So health is going through a major revolution. And it's just right at the very start of what we're going to be able to do with personalised medicine and the research that comes from this. When we think about health, though, privacy of information and security, we don't want our personal information being shared. And when you think of security in the cloud, security is job zero. At Amazon Web Services, it's actually our #1 priority by every single one of us that work at AWS. One thing I've learnt over the last kind of 10 years of people building in the cloud is that if you don't think about security at the start and build your application stack within the foundations of a well-secured environment, trying to wrap it around afterwards is almost impossible to do. And when you look at this, you really want to look at how security in the cloud is fundamentally different to how you do it on premises. In on-premises, it's often static and you're protecting the perimeter. In the cloud, you protect each individual component and you very tightly control it down. But at the same time, the platform is not static. It's dynamic, it's changing, it's evolving. It's reacting to the real-time load and threats that can be coming against it. And this is where you want to use things such as, for example, very tightly controlled identity and access management. You want to have detective controls through AWS Config and CloudTrail, Guard Duty, which I talked about earlier. You want to have that infrastructure protection because the size of the attacks that can occur when you're running something that is highly visible online can be massive. Brad talked about, for example, the quote from the Australian Bureau of Statistics around census, and why did they test it to 400 times the capacity? Well, unfortunately, if people are going to do a denial of service against something like a census, which would be a high-profile event, that's the type of real load that that system's going to have to withstand. That's the unfortunate reality of what security in an online environment goes through. You want to be able to protect your data through encryption services and key management, highly sophisticated users, and you want to have incident response. What if I do detect something? Can I use Lambda to actually automatically take action far faster than I can even notify a human, let alone have them do something about it? This automation is absolutely key, and then when you think about your security posture and you use the cloud, really be conscious about what you're automating and what you haven't. And you should constantly challenge yourselves around, are you automating as much as you possibly can? And when you do this, you want to do it in the framework of the certification, attestations, and regulatory bodies that you need to be part of. Right here in Australia, for example, IRAP is important, but globally, if you're exporting your applications and data around the world, this becomes key, particularly in the case of data privacy. And one of the biggest changes that's occurred, I've never received so much email about companies from the GDPR. Everyone noticed that every single website now tells you they've got cookies and you can kind of click on accept. This has all been driven out of the European Union, where they really had this big focus around what are the rights of an individual to their data and how is that being used. And it's been really fascinating to see how GDPR, which came out of Europe, has impacted the world around how we do things. Because actually all of us are working within a global, or in a kind of global environment these days where users can be anywhere. There are Australian citizens, for example, who live outside of Australia, still accessing information back here in Australia. There are people that may have lived in Australia, doing studies, worked, and gone back home, but still have interactions on a regular basis within Australia. GDPR starts becoming interesting in those type of use cases. I'm a big fan of sometimes looking at what I think is best practice implementations when it comes to security, privacy, regulation, and just using that as actually the baseline. If you architect and design your systems to that, you're in a really good place. Because at some point, these new regulations will filter down. You see it already in Australia. We're looking at constantly at our own regulations and how they can be strengthened over time with the advent of technology coming in. And so that's really important for all workloads. It's important in the case of health and life sciences data. But Australia, we have a very strong history of innovation. Everything from the Hills hoist to drying our clothes, to science, peanut allergies, how to solve things there. But there's an organisation called IP Australia, and they're tasked with actually kind of managing the intellectual property of Australia. How can we make use of it? How do we protect it? How do they use technology? And ultimately, how do they innovate themselves? So Alexa, please welcome to the stage our next customer.
Please welcome to the stage, Kevin Jeffrey, Chief Data Officer, IP Australia.
Thanks very much, Glenn. That was fantastic. And I'm glad that we're talking about innovation. And obviously everybody out here, I'd like to see, whenever we're thinking about innovation, that we're straight up thinking about getting a trademark or a patent for whatever we need to get it for. I'm the Chief Data Officer. I know a few of you are dealing with data, a few of you are dealing with technology. Many of you are dealing with business, but I'm hopefully at the end of my presentation you'll actually think that you're all actually dealing with data, and data is the most important thing. If you don't quite get there, that's okay. IP Australia, definitely our job is to manage the innovation system within Australia. We are part of a world innovation system, but really what we have to do is look after the patents, the protection of trademarks, the protection of designs, and the protection of plant breeders' rights in Australia and for Australians across the world. We are an agency that is rich in data. We have been around for 100 years as the Patents and Trademarks Office and more recently the IP Australia. Over that time we've developed probably, like I say, 100 years worth of data. We have over 100,000 applications per year within Australia, and that is for the protection of IP rights within Australia. Probably more importantly though, we are linked with the rest of the world. The IP system is a world-based system. You can imagine if it wasn't, well, we'd be able to get trademarks in Australia, but then you couldn't protect that same trademark around the world. what that really means for us is that the data comes from the rest of the world, and then we on-share the data to the rest of the world as part of the business process. Patent applications, when they come from overseas into Australia, bring a lot of data with them, and what we can then do with that data is quite large. There is quite a lot of applications now increasingly using our data. One of the things I have to do as Chief Data Officer, I'm trying to create data as an asset, increase data, the value of the data that we have, and what I want to do with that is actually make more use of the data downstream from the actual process itself. And that requires quite a bit of a change of thinking. It requires a change in culture. It requires a change in the way we architect our systems, and it requires a change in the way we use our data. This is probably not to say that we are bad at doing analytics in the agency, and that's not what I'm aiming to say here. What I've found as I've been around in IP Australia for a couple of years is that we are an innovation agency. As mentioned before, we are doing things in quite an innovative way. One of the challenges though, and I've been in other agencies and this is a reasonably common challenge, we've built quite a range of useful applications both in collecting data better, using specific data sets better, enabling our new data science teams, our reporting teams or our analysis teams to do better work with data. But what they've tended to do is they do it in an ad hoc way. We don't have an environment that can handle the speed of change that a data scientist needs, but also keep providing him the data at the same time. He either gets the tools or the data, it seems. What we've got to do is get past that in a way that can get the analytics they need to the tools, with the tools, to the data they need, with a platform that's powerful enough to allow them to do it, because the data's growing at the same time. As the Chief Data Officer, what that means to me is I want to get rid of this proliferation, spaghettification was a word my old boss used, of data. And I'd be surprised if in your own agencies you don't have the same problem of data spaghetti that's been built up over the years. As Chief Data Officer, I want to make sure I can find my data, I can value it, and I can get it shared and used in a better way. I often compare myself to a Chief Finance Officer. Most CFOs, I would think, if they're doing their job properly, know exactly where the money is and who's allowed to spend it. It's very hard to say that as Chief Data Officer that I even know where all the data is. What we're trying to do is actually enable that, give that sort of additional protection to the data and governance over the data, but in a way that actually enables the speed of analysis and analytics that we want to do. I've got a quote on here, 2 years and $2 million. That is a quote that our chief economist used some year or two ago as to why he's had to build his own analytical tools. What we want to do is get us to a place where it's not 2 years and $2 million for every analytical tool we want to build. So I use that as a starting point and say, if that's the thing we're coming from, that we need to change that. So we developed a project. It's called the Business Intelligence and Analytics Project. I don't think we did a very good job with the acronym. The chief economist I talk about has produced the 7th most downloaded data product on data.gov.au. It's called IP God, and it has a live version called IP Gold. So somewhere in our agency we do have a good acronym writer, and I suggest that every agency needs one of those. The reason I've got BI&A as a foundational capability, I have a data strategy that I have to implement. The total aim of that data strategy is to make data an asset, is to improve the value of the data, and therefore you want to use it more. So the BI&A project, going on the theme of the day, is building on a lot of other things we're doing to the data, but what we're aiming now to do is build on the types of infrastructure that we can get access to in order to build this project. One of the keys to it is it's enterprise-wide. We wanted to get away from analytics teams building their own things, and it really is a cultural shift. But I think probably what I've underestimated there is the number of cultural shifts we're trying to do at once. The cultural shift to make data an asset, the cultural shift to move to the cloud, and the cultural shift to move to that sort of rapid processing and continuous integration that is enabled in these sort of practices that really the analytics people need. I've got that diagram on there because it's about single source of truth, but I wanted to say that I had to say something about single source of truth. I am a Chief Data Officer. But it's not about putting all your data in one place. It's about making sure that your data, your business facts, is known, is agreed, is understood, and is available and shared. One thing, don't let people say, if you put it all in one database, it's a single source of truth. That is not the answer. As we've got into this project, we realised early when we did our roadmap, we had to do this agile. We had to prepare a vision, and we had to make it in a way that we could innovate as we went. We've done agile delivery in a fairly careful way. We have a key partner who's carrying the risk with us. We have a set of principles that mean we don't actually divert from the path too far. The set of principles define how we make decisions as we get into this project, and as we get increasing numbers of product owners throughout the agency who want their analytics and their analysis and reporting processes to be using our platform, the easier it is to divert to any one of those. But we have the principles in play and they keep us on track. And it is working. We're 5 months in, we're doing monthly sprints. We started out with 3 monthly release cycle that we planned into the contract and the process. We released the first one after 3 months with a data lake available to be filled with one pipeline into that data lake with a set of labs able to be used straight up. What we then realised that because we're starting to build pipelines and people want pipelines of data, we have to get quicker. So we've changed it straight up to monthly releases. We're keeping up with that. What probably the key is that I want to focus on this one is that we as an agency in this fast-moving space have to focus on our governance, because data governance is new and we're trying hard, but also introducing a fast path adds much more need to focus on the governance. And what I've found as I've got into it, we need to focus on demand management. When I've got an agile backlog and then I've suddenly got 6 product owners who all want the ones that the user stories that suit them, and it's increasing because as you go with agile, you increase your knowledge, and your aim is to increase the knowledge of people around you. Demand management increases. The other lesson I've learned I'll throw out there is communication is never enough. Constant communication is essential so that people can understand, because there is that much change and we're doing things at speed, so you need more communication. Just to sort of talk about the sort of things we're doing, we are all about increasing trust in our data and insights available from our data. One of the examples that we're aiming to do with this is being able to, the platform can be used not only by us, but by our international partners. So we've developed the first proof of concept of an international trademarks linking system. It's the first of its kind that allows analytics of trademarks, trademark data across all trademarks linked across the world. We've got trademarks data from 5 agencies around the world. We've joined it up. You can now follow where a company has taken a trademark around the world, which you could never do before. And we're aiming to allow shortly those agencies to be able to come in and do that once we've solved all the challenges we need to do. So thank you very much. And I think what I have learned is that AWS has a 11-second release cycle. Hopefully we're down from the $2 million in 2 years, but we may not get to 11 seconds of release cycle, but that's something to aim for. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. So, Kevin, thank you for sharing what's happening at IP Australia. $2 million, 2 years to do analytics. Great segue into what is cutting edge with data analytics today. I just want to give you a kind of a real customer example. FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority in the US, where they use kind of data lakes built on Amazon S3, object storage systems, infinitely scalable and highly durable. And they mix this with kind of batch processing with Elastic MapReduce and some other technologies to detect fraud, abuse, and insider trading. And they do this at incredible scale, over 600 plus terabytes of data. And they're able to process this as quickly as they can, kind of trillions upon records. And when these volumes spike, you can imagine the stock market and financial markets, they're not always predictable. Depends what's happening around the world. It can create great chaos within those things. So they need to be able to do that. They need to be able to dynamically scale their compute to be able to keep track of what could be fraudulent or a misappropriation of those financial transactions. And so the data lakes allowed FINRA analysts to quickly identify when those violations occur. And it's what allowed them to do is move over 200 relational databases to AWS as part of that. And it's this is real world stuff that's happening right now as we speak. Actually, when you think about this moving of relational databases to the cloud, one of the challenges has been often that includes migrating the database engine themselves. And so we developed the database migration service, which is a tool to make it easier for customers where you have your on-premises database that may be running a number of different engines from proprietary database vendors. And how do you move these easily to the cloud? How do I migrate between on-prem and AWS? How do I migrate between the database? And what happens if I need to stop, start? Sometimes these migrations can take a while. I need to do automated schema conversion, for example, depending if I'm moving from database to database, and I want to be able to have no downtime. I want to have zero impact on my customers as I do this. This all happens as part of the database migration service. It's been used more than 76,000 times to migrate databases to AWS. It's powerful things. Database is often the core of your application stack. But if you look at what's happening with data analytics and big data, you can't talk about this without thinking about machine learning. This is one of the biggest mega trends that's happening across the industry right now. And the reason machine learning is so important is because the insights and the ability for you to deal with massive volumes of data that, to be honest, they're just incomprehensible for us mere humans to understand. You need the power of machine learning, which is incredible at detecting patterns and identifying insights as to what is actually happening. But the challenge with machine learning is that it's often been in the domain of experts. And if you've ever tried to hire a data scientist, one, they're incredibly rare because you need to hire an expert that has a combination of three very different skill sets. They need to be a background in computer science. They need to have a mathematics and statistical background. And third, they need to have business skills. Because it's actually the combination of those three unique skill sets together that allows them to be a data scientist. You can't operate with data and get insights if you don't understand the business you're trying to model. You need to have that deep insight. And so those skills are very rare, and as a result of them being very rare, there's a few people that have them, they're incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. It's great if you're a data scientist, not so much if you're trying to hire them. And so when we looked at this, we kind of realized that if you want machine learning to truly scale and be put in the hands of every single developer out there, we need a new stack. We need to leverage some of the aspects that the cloud already provides around infinite data, hyperscale compute, and speed in all the right places. From ingestion of data to the processing of it, the refactoring of it, the actual analytics, the sharing of it. It wants to be extensible. Data is constantly evolving and changing, and the value of the data, the more you have and the more you can collect, the more you can add metadata to it, particularly at the edge of your networks as you bring data in from sensors. This is why I think IoT is such a big game changer, is it allows us to collect more information than we've ever been able to collect before. And tagging that. And then you want it to be accessible. There's no point collecting all of this data if you can't access it. You want to make it available to as many people as you want. But then it starts getting back to the privacy and security. I'm going to have multiple versions of my data within the data lake. I'm going to have one version, for example, that has all of the raw data. It's kind of safe, secure, it's going to be encrypted, have key rotation, lots of very, very advanced security processors in it. But I'm probably not going to actually have too many people access. It's going to be heavily restricted. And then I might take that data and as it's coming in real time, transform it and strip it, for example, of privacy information and credit card details and things like this. And I may store that as an anonymized data set. A lot safer to share within the organization. I can still look for trends across this. And data scientists can use it, analysts can use it, developers can use it. And you actually see that companies and customers have many different versions of that data for different use cases. Because the cost of storing it in the cloud is so cheap, you're not penalized for it. It's far more secure to just have completely standalone copies that you treat very differently than trying to have a single master version and trying to control that through views and schemas, which if you make a mistake, you may have access to the crown jewels. This is a completely different way that you think about accessing your data when you move towards the cloud. And so if you take these attributes and you think about the machine learning stack at AWS, I really want to kind of talk about two of these in detail. There's three layers here. From the bottom, this is for people who are incredibly comfortable as machine learning engineers around building highly scalable, high computational throughput ML frameworks. This is where you're playing with things like TensorFlow and MXNet. You're looking at GPU technologies. You're using Intel math libraries, which can give you incredible speed performances as you go through this. This is where you really get excited by being kind of hands-on with the tech. But it's not for everybody. If you look at that middle layer, Amazon SageMaker, this is where we took feedback from our customers, particularly from the data scientists. And what the feedback we had from data scientists was that they want to be able to focus on the development of the models. These are the algorithm models around, how do I do computer vision, for example, with single shot detection? How do I do my convolutional neural networks? I want to focus on that. I want to understand what is the best algorithm that's going to drive the insight I want. How do I train this model? How do I retrain it? And I don't want to worry about the infrastructure. This is the undifferentiated heavy lifting. Just like we did those years ago where we looked and removed the data center components about you having to worry about hardware and the provisioning of network switches and cabling. And we did that with EC2, for example. SageMaker does the same thing, but in the world of machine learning. It allows data scientists to focus on the data and not the underlying scale and performance aspects. SageMaker does that for you. And it actually does it end to end. It's one of the most powerful AI services we've seen where customers are able to do this on their own. And then at the top of the stack, these are the application services. What about if you want to use the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning and actually you know nothing about it at all? You're not even wanting to write a line of code. Well, this is where things like, for example, Polly and Lex, building on the voice services that were built in the Alexa device, who's been introducing our speakers today. You can do text-to-speech, speech-to-text without having to understand about the models behind it. Image recognition with recognition, translate, transcribe. This is just the start of being able to use some of the world's leading ML use cases without you having to understand what's happening behind that velvet curtain. And it's amazing what you can do when you take some of these technologies and use it. Skin Vision, which is a company based out of Brussels. Unfortunately in Australia, we have a really high case of skin cancer, melanoma. And so Skin Vision, they look at this, and they thought, well, all of us have smartphones with pretty good cameras. What if we could take a photo of something we suspect, use machine learning algorithms to actually analyze what that freckle or mole is doing, and then give you feedback as to, look, it's nothing to worry about, or actually you should go see a doctor. What they've found by doing this is that their accuracy rates of their machine learning models that they've been able to train is greater than 90% of specialists, dermatologists who do this for a living. Now, what this does is, this is all happening just on a mobile phone. You get an answer within minutes. You don't have to make a trip to a doctor. And you think about how this is important. Well, a lot of us probably have the luxury of living close to where there's medical supplies. What if you're out in the country and getting to your closest doctor is many, many, many hours away? You're less likely to go and do that. Whereas a quick photo and you do this. And what I love is you take all of these technologies together, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, virtual reality, which is also just a cool area. And what I'm fascinated about is what if you combine all these things together? What magical things can you do that, to be honest, was in the realm of science fiction only 5 years ago? Absolutely excited that our next customer is actually doing things with this combination of technologies that is actually world-leading right here from Australia. It's so proud to see Australia continuing to innovate at that world-class level. So let's see who's our next customer is. Alexa, please introduce our next speaker.
Please welcome to the stage Helen Souness, Chief Executive Officer, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology Online.
morning, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Ngunnawal people, and to respectfully acknowledge their elders, past, present, and future. I could not be more excited to be here today to present to you two things. One is a case study of how our university in Melbourne is applying some of the breaking edge, cutting edge technology coming from AWS in the form of Amazon Sumerian. And also to make some announcements of 3 new courses we are launching today using these technologies and trying to address the skills gap we see as the adoption curve accelerates on emerging tech and people are trying to catch up. We're going to be helping them with 3 courses launched today, but I'll wait a moment for the reveal. Now, I know that some people have fears around this kind of breaking edge technology, around robotics, about artificial intelligence. Some see some kind of dystopian future fears emerge. And we do not deny that absolutely the pace of changing is accelerating and that has challenges in it. A young Australian starting their job today, of those, 70% in the next 10 to 15 years will have that job replaced by automation or significantly changed by automation. There is certainly challenges around the emerging tech we see, and yet we see enormous opportunity at RMIT in these technologies, not to replace humans, not to have the robotics taking over, but to augment human capabilities, to make our customer service better, to make our shopping experiences better, our tourism better, our healthcare, the incredible examples with machine learning we've already heard today in the treatment of various diseases. We think there's an enormous potential with augmenting humans, as well as, obviously, like this guy, you can just look a lot cooler. RMIT, in fact, has a really strong history of working with industry and breaking technologies. The royal bit of Melbourne Institute of Technology was actually a thank you after our work during the Second World War in the breaking technologies of radar, which literally changed the course of history. So we were really excited to meet with AWS earlier this year and learn about some of the technologies coming out of that incredible innovator themselves. And one of the areas that we saw huge potential when we saw the demo of Amazon Sumerian for the first time only a few months ago was in the area of belonging, a really important strategy for us, for our students on campus and studying with us online as well. Why is belonging important? A social connection to the institution and to the fellow students for a student. We know from our own longitudinal research in the College of Design and Social Context at RMIT that social connection, belonging, not only increases student engagement while a student is studying, it actually impacts longitudinal graduate outcomes. They are more successful if they have a sense of connectedness with their fellow students in university. And there are moments of particularly acute need for us to support our students in their journey with us. Imagine this is a text into RMIT from one of our students. Imagine, worst case, it's midnight on a Saturday night, and with our human limitations, we're probably out carousing or, in some cases, at home in bed. Imagine we could have a digital assistant respond in this moment of crisis to the student with the information they need in the moment they need it. Now, we don't need to imagine, because I'd like to introduce you to Ada. Ada is built in very quickly using the tools and capabilities of the Amazon Sumerian platform as a digital assistant, operating on a number of platforms, frankly, wherever our students are spending time. She's on Facebook, she's on Google, she's responding to text messages, she's on any web browser, any mobile device. She is responding already to queries about fees. She can go into our databases, validate it's the student. She can answer questions, what else? About timetabling, about locations around the campus.
Hello. I'm here to help you find activities you might like between your classes.
She also does that. Sorry, Ada. So she can look at your actual personal timetable and look up the social activities, the sporting activities, the things that would increase your connection to fellow students, where you have free periods in your timetable. If you accept some of those activities, she'll even remind you on the day of what to bring, and she'll send you a map on where to go. Increasing the sense of student belonging in our university experience. Really exciting tech. But is it just exciting tech? We don't think so. Already at the prototype stage, Ada is able to respond to 16% of our student queries, immediately, consistently, accurately. That would be, in our estimations, around 12,000 human interactions we've saved last year. It's a real business case. But also, it's not about just saving money. What that enables us to do is get away from the human interactions that are mundane lookups of a database on fees and move them into value-added human interaction. It's augmenting our human capabilities, it's not replacing them. So I hope that starts to stimulate your minds on what some of these technologies could do in your businesses and government departments. Let's dream for a moment in the streets of Melbourne. We think we're really standing at the tipping point of adopting some of these technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality. What could it mean for your customer service, for tourism points of interest pointed out as you walk through the streets of Melbourne, for so many use cases and potential? And we don't think it's the future, we think it's here and now. A really interesting report I saw just last week from Ernst Young coming out and saying that only a year ago they surveyed Australian businesses who said 67% of them said, oh no, we'll never adopt artificial intelligence in our businesses. Just a year later, they've just published the report again, saying 83% of Australian businesses are going to embrace artificial intelligence in the next 2 years. We just see this enormous adoption curve taking off. And what we see in all of our industry conversations, and we're working with industry partners across my whole portfolio in RMIT Online, everyone is saying the thing that will hold us back is a skills shortage, which is where my team comes in, trying to address the needs for all of these pilots and prototypes we all want to do as we experiment and start to scale these new technologies. So I'm very excited to announce the first of our short courses targeted. My team's mission is to build a community of lifelong learners successfully navigating the world of work. That's leaning right into the fact that, yes, sometimes a degree is the right solution education-wise for a person, but throughout our lives, certainly I know in my digital career, constantly we need to be updating our skills. We need to understand this new emerging technology, have an opportunity to talk to experts in the industry and understand how we can start to apply it to our businesses and government departments. So we see this need and we want to step up with it. So today we are announcing, you can buy them now if you're wanting to get online now. The first of our courses, Developing AI Strategy. Does everyone in the room really know what neuro-linguistic programming can do for your business? Do you want to understand these core concepts better in order to work through how they might impact your business plans over the coming years? Do you want to understand a bit more about the AI stack, about robotics, about machine learning, about the differences and the capabilities between them? And even better, do you want to understand that from some of the leading gurus in the space? We've developed this with AWS Educate content, with experts in Seattle in these spaces, but we also deliver it with industry mentors. So we're working with the very wonderful IT consulting firm Versant, based in Melbourne, and Eliza, one of the absolute leaders in the artificial intelligence space in Australia. They'll have mentors on the course supporting the students' learning. And look, once all these people We've had a change of order. I'm just going to flick. No, back. Sorry. So the other area of emerging technology that we're very conscious is about to hit massive adoption and people need to get their heads around is augmented and virtual reality. Does that seem like, when you see the people wearing the immersive headsets, it seems maybe it's a bit futuristic. We don't think so. Gartner suggests that there will be 100 million shoppers in augmented reality in 2 years' time, by 2020. You can already go on the IKEA app and see what their furniture looks like in your living room. We're already there. And we think we all need to get our heads around it. So this is another course targeting executives. It's about 5 to 7 hours learning a week for 6 weeks. It's the core fundamentals from the experts. And then your final assignment is applying it in your business. In this particular course, it's pretty cool. There'll be a really simple templated version of an Amazon Sumerian digital assistant who you will animate. Even though you have no coding skills for this course, you will animate to introduce your strategy as your final assessment on the course. And then finally, with all of this great strategy work our students will be doing in these breaking edge areas, we know that there'll need to be a few more people who know how to actually build these apps. And so the final course we're announcing today is designing and developing VR and AR applications. It will actually get on the tools on the Amazon Sumerian platform. And by the end of the course, we don't have any prerequisites, is the truth. Some basic coding would be helpful to go into this course with. But by the end of the course, the student will actually have animated an entire 3D scene and have a digital assistant that they have animated talk the user through their scene, be it a tourist point with points of interest explained, be it a machine, some of these amazing applications for technical machinery where you do an augmented reality or a virtual reality version of instructions so a person can experience what it's like to fix that machine and all the detailed instructions for doing so. Whatever the scene will be, the students will be applying this knowledge by the end of a 6-week course starting in October, on sale today. We're very, very proud that we've discovered that this is a world first, training people in this technology, and to be working with AWS on it has been just an amazing experience. The lucky students on this course will actually have a live Q&A with the wonderful Mark Francis, one of the product leads for Amazon Sumerian in Seattle. We're just so excited to be working with our industry partners in delivering these courses. I just want to give you a little bit of a feel, because online learning, not everyone has experienced it yet. You may have gone onto a MOOC, which is a very unsupported learning experience, perhaps. But I just want to show you a little bit inside these courses. Some of the fundamentals that we're really pioneering at RMIT Online in online learning are things like very, very interactive learning experiences and making sure all our students in whatever we're teaching, be it Swift coding with Apple, one of our first short courses, or in Amazon Sumerian, they'll get on the tools, they'll learn how to use them and manipulate them, and they'll learn the tips and tricks from industry experts working in the space. We find our industry mentors on the course have a number of functions. One is just inspiration, because they have loads of stories and examples of how they're using these technologies or business principles in the case of some of our courses. And that's inspiration for our students. It's also connections to a community. Remember, our mission was a community of lifelong learners, because social learning is such an important part of the learning experience. That we also connect them, and we're finding some of the industry partners are also hiring straight out of our courses, so that's a lovely extra in many cases as well. And of course, they end their course once they have passed their assessment. We do have a rigorous assessment, but it's absolutely applied. It will be something that you can actually show in your portfolio or apply in your business straight away. You get a credential from RMIT University, and you have pathways into our accredited programs should you want to stack these short courses up into a degree program at some point. So that's a little bit of a feel inside these courses to give you a feel for them. Very, very proud to be here today. Very delighted with the collaboration we have had with AWS and to really embrace these emerging technologies. We're so excited to see what our students will do with these new skills and absolutely to equip them for the future now. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Amazing stuff. If there's one thing in common you should take away from Dennis from CSIRO, Kevin from IP Australia, and Helen with this world-leading combination, is that the application is constantly evolving. The foundations in terms of how you build them, the context of how people are using them, and the integration with other technology suites, both within your own organizations and outside. What this is leading towards is what we call digital transformation, which is often an overused term, and sometimes you get tired of hearing it, but it is absolutely true that it drives every single thing that we're doing. And I can't help but be excited by what is happening right here in Australia and will be leading other parts of the world. The other takeaway I want you from this, and Brad talked about this right at the very start, where he's excited about what you can build. And one of the things we're really passionate about at AWS is that everybody is a builder. It's not just in the hands of the engineers and the developers anymore. It's data professionals. It's the C-level suite. It's nothing better than running a hackathon and seeing CXOs rolling the sleeves up and trying to get Java dependencies working on a laptop. It's brilliant. I love it. They realize that maybe they should be looking after their IT teams a little bit more. Data scientists, IT ops. So if you have ideas, and this is the real power of a summit, it's the networking. Go to the breakout sessions. We have some wonderful speakers from AWS, from customers, from partners who are sharing their real-world experience. You've got lunch and breaks in between. Talk to people around you and just see what everyone's doing and thinking. It's amazing what you hear at these events. With that, there's never been a better time to build. So go build. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.